Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 18th of July 2024. I'm going to try and do the military aid and geopolitics news all in one video today. There's not too much military aid and equipment news to share with you. President Zelensky of Ukraine is over in the UK at the moment to have a European meeting at Blenheim Palace concerning European stuff. He said officially, he said the fewer restrictions we have on the use of effective weapons, the more actively Russia will strive for peace. Military airfields from which Russian aircraft and bombs take off against our cities, Russian missile launch sites, all this must be destroyed. And he's absolutely right, and he's been very clear about this. We must destroy all Russian airfields. It's that simple. Let us do this. Stop restricting us. The single biggest criticism of the US support of Ukraine is not allowing them to go far enough. Indeed, Lord Robertson, who is the former Defence Secretary of the UK back in, I think, Blair times, he became Secretary General of NATO, has said we need to fight Russia with the gloves off. Right, and that's coming from the former NATO Secretary General. This is reported by Cormac Smith as well. Or there's a bit of analysis here, which I completely agree with.
Yesterday, Lord Robertson, head of Britain's Strategic Defence Review and former chief of NATO, came out and said we need to fight Russia with the gloves off. And to be very honest, for the last 2.5 years, despite the billions of military aid that the West has pumped into Ukraine, we have not been fighting with the gloves off, nor allowing Ukraine to fight with the gloves fully off. Our approach has been characterized by incrementalism, constantly being cowed by Putin's thinly veiled nuclear threats, and a fear of crossing what is perceived as Putin's red lines. Let's have a look at a few of these red lines. Modern battle tanks were a red line. Well, the Brits broke that one in 2023, February, with the supply of 14 Challengers. Long-range artillery was supposed to be a red line. Again, Britain broke that in May 2023 with the provision of Storm Shadow. And again, less than a month ago, the British government said that Storm Shadow could now be used to strike Russian targets behind Russian lines, i.e. in Russian territory. Again, a supposed red line to which the Kremlin has not reacted. But I think the biggest red line of all is possibly NATO membership. And you will remember that great Russian lie that it was NATO expansion up to Russia's borders and eastward that had caused Russia to invade Ukraine in the first place. We hear this all the time, and we hear it amplified by useless idiots. Well, let's look what happened when we were discussing the accession of Sweden and Finland last year. Finland, when they finally joined NATO, with a border of 1,340 kilometers with Russia. And what is the first thing Russia did? They withdrew all their troops from the Finnish border.
Well, the first thing they did is actually say that we're going to create this new military district to shore up the border. And of course, they didn't have anyone there to do that. And they've subsequently taken 80% of personnel and material away from there. But yeah, I mean, the point is that red lines are claimed to be drawn. But when Ukraine and their allies approach those red lines and go over them, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Anyway, he goes on, really good section there, sort of almost 4 minutes of him saying what we all know, which is Ukraine should be able to operate with gloves off without one hand tied behind their back. Now, French aid to Ukraine says the equivalent of a French brigade or 2,100 Ukrainian soldiers are expected to be in France at the end of September for 2 months of combat training. Ukrainian soldiers will also receive military equipment. According to a document consulted by France Info, there will be 128 VABs, these are armoured personnel vehicles, 18 Caesars and 24 AMX-10 RCs. So the AMX-10 are the light tanks that look like that on wheels. Anti-tank missiles, trucks and radars will be the rest of the additional French equipment. So good news there. Indeed, someone else updating the French equipment with 128 extra VABs taken from 284 to 412. Another 24 AMX-10 RCs taking them from 38 to 62. Another 18 Bogdanas being paid for by the Danish there. So that is 18 of the indigenously produced self-propelled guns, and then another 4 GCS 200 MCV deminers from US and Canada. Here are all the vehicles. Those are the deminers. Those are the Bogdanas. That's the AMX 10 RC. And those are the VABs pledged from France. So they are phasing those out, I think, and they're basically giving all of their obsolete stuff to Ukraine, or Ukraine get first dibs on that. So there's potentially a lot of kit coming from France as it gets phased out. Ukraine ramps up its own arms production, but lacks several key elements, including explosives and rocket fuel, according to Camille Sheehan, top-knot guy who, in Business Insider, he interviewed. He is the Strategic Industries Minister. Now the country is creating its own drones, artillery and missiles at a top pace to complement the supply of Western weapons. But there are these, unfortunately, there are these bottlenecks. Explosives and rocket fuel seem to be in high demand. Okay, Euromaidan Press and many others reported yesterday on those 32 decommissioned F-16s going to Ukraine from Greece. And I said yesterday, I'm not sure whether they're selling them, giving them, or what the situation is. And I'm not 100% sure it's like definitely going to happen. Greece have been a bit pernickety with that previously in terms of making sure that they get backfilled first before they give stuff to Ukraine due to issues with Turkey. And as Nell reports, kind of rightly says, this news is written so wrongly everywhere. Greece only intends to sell 32 F-16s to the US, but wants a guarantee that it can purchase F-35s or Rafales as replacements. It also does not want to deliver prematurely due to the threat from Turkey, their words, and does not want to cause gaps in their air force. If there is a deal, it will take years and deliveries will be piecemeal. Absolutely what I would think as well. And so, you need to be careful about how you report that, or how you read other people reporting it. French aid to Ukraine says, he didn't say, but this is actually Valérie Hayer, who is European Deputy President of Renew Europe. So that is the centrists, the Macron centrists here. We need to invest to create a genuine European defence market. The United States has just one type of tank, the Europeans 17. How can we claim to be effective when we are so fragmented? And it's obviously not just about us. We promise the Ukrainian people who are repelling the Russian invasion that we should be by their side for as long as it takes. But we need to go further. We need to act as soon as possible. Great words from her. It's going to be very interesting going forward with where Europe tries to strategically place itself. If there's going to be this great mitigation against a Trumpian isolationism, when you've got Trump and Vance saying all sorts of things about Ukraine, then it's up to Europe to support Ukraine, possibly on their own. How do they mitigate against that? And what they might do, as we've already seen with the European defence strategy, is rely much more on their own indigenous defence military industrial complexes and move away from dependence on the US. Now that will hurt the US. I wonder whether one of the hopes for people like JD Vance and Trump, JD Vance is from, or is senator of Ohio. Ohio is where they make Abrams tanks, right? There will be pressure from these defense manufacturers on senators, on lawmakers, representatives, and on the president and vice president saying, look, if you guys are going to isolate, if you're going to retreat from the world, if you're not going to get involved in world affairs, brilliant, okay, great, isolationism, you might like that, but, we employ loads of people, and people from outside of our country buy a lot of stuff from us. And if you're saying, screw you guys, we're going to do this ourselves and you can work on your own problems and Ukraine's a European problem, then the Europeans are going to say, okay, US will screw you because we ain't going to buy your stuff. And, we'll buy it until we can generate our own decent equipment. So there's been talk over the last couple of days of the SAMP-T being in the sights of people like Brazil, looking at SAMP-T, the new version of SAMP-T that's due to come, that is supposed to be pretty decent in terms of a competitor for the Patriot. Now, you might have Europe that just saying, right, we need to start thinking with a much more joined up manner with regard to how we place ourselves in the world, but also strategically with our own manufacturing and industrial bases, so that there is interoperability and consistency across Europe. Now, that means that there will have to be talk about a European army, probably, or at least a much closer security agreement among European nations. And then you're going to have to think about, well, what happens if Hungary starts being difficult and Slovakia starts being difficult, a bit like NATO? How does NATO deal with those two countries? Because one of the problems I've been thinking about, just getting rid of Hungary and Slovakia from NATO or from the EU is that they have an awful lot of intelligence. Not only are there intelligence systems that depend on them, although you could say they're compromised, but actually they will have a lot of knowledge that if you kick them out of NATO, then they go straight to Russia with that knowledge. It's really risky once you've let someone into your inner circle to then eject them from your inner circle. It's a zero-sum game. They will just go to the other side, right? And they'll go, oh, all that NATO stuff you want to know about? We've got an absolute ton of intel. You can't kick Hungary out easily. It will cost you in terms of an absolutely phenomenal amount of intelligence. What they've been trying to do, I think, is restrict the amount of intelligence that goes Hungary's way. But they will know strategically how NATO works, what their plans are for a war with Russia. Kicking Hungary out of NATO is almost impossible. I think you'd much rather there was a change of government in Hungary, and so efforts would be underway to try and achieve that. But then that means interfering with the democratic processes of another country. I'm not saying they're doing that, but you would much rather a regime change than kicking them out of NATO. Anyway, I think you are going to see some much more joined up thinking with regard to European defence going forward. Payments to Russian military servicemen and their families over the last 12 months amounted to 8% of all federal government spending, a study has found. The sum in question is equivalent to 1.5% of Russia's GDP. So 1.5% of Russia's GDP is spent on military servicemen and their families' payments. It's either wages or compensation. It's absolutely staggering, if true. A court in the German city of Stuttgart on July the 17th has convicted a couple, both German-Russian nationals, of supplying drone parts to Russia. Good news that is taking place, that there is some comeuppance for these people. Okay, moving on to geopolitical subjects. Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Great Britain. He's, as mentioned, meeting at Blenheim Palace. He's arrived to participate in the summit, bilateral meetings with partners. It's planned to... the objective is to sign an intergovernmental agreement on the support of the Ukrainian defence industry, discuss future defence cooperation and expand defence capabilities. Zelensky has called on, Britain to follow Churchill's example to protect Europe. Will Europe remain a continent that will not give up in the face of tyrants? Will Europe be a continent of free nations and communities who are not afraid to fight? We all see how much the courage of previous generations helps us, Zelensky has said. So he's all in on trying to shore up European unity and support for Ukraine. Now, Reuters, Ursula von der Leyen plans to create an EU defence alliance if re-elected. Now, I was just as your man Cormac Smith was talking earlier, something came up on my phone that I then just pulled up here, which shows that she has been elected. So this has just happened, just come in. So she was kind of nominated. There's all this long, drawn-out process, but the end result is that she's now going to be the European Commission chief, which is really good news for continuity for support for Ukraine. Really, really good news. European Parliament confirms Ursula von der Leyen as European Commission president. But the French far-right National Rally's Jordan Bardella said that the Patriots Group will be, during this mandate, the only patriotic group to resolutely oppose the Green Deal, the Migration Pact, and the dissolution of our nations, and of course, oppose support for Ukraine as well. Although National Rally have said they will support Ukraine, but with loads of caveats. And of course, that coalition of European parties is the coalition that includes Viktor Orban's Fidesz party as well. In fact, he was the one who started the Patriots group. So yeah, you can see how they are going to play things going forward. Dick Schoof, who is the new Dutch Prime Minister, congratulating von der Leyen. He's going to be an interesting one because he's in charge of a coalition of parties who include PVV and Geert Wilders, who is essentially more pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian than the coalition partners. There's been some disagreement over the last few days with regard to, is it condemnation of Russia? Two of the parties agreed and he didn't, or something. There were some issues within Dutch politics that shows there's a little bit of, not necessarily a crack in the coalition, but some very differing views there in the context of Russia and the Ukrainian war. And Geert Wilders is being typically Geert Wilders. Talking about the edges of Europe here, and in fact, this is incredibly worrying because we talked about this some months ago, how things were brewing in the Balkans. You've got Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, you got Kosovo. It's all very febrile, the atmosphere there, and there have been Russia has been stoking discontent there, poking the hornet's nest and fomenting discord with regard to ultra-nationalism, particularly in these areas. They're so good at doing that. Well, Ivana Stradna, someone I really want to interview actually, who's an expert in the area, says Serbian propaganda says that Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina are preparing for a war against Serbia. In fact, it's the Serbian government that is preparing for another escalation in the Balkans. And this year, American intelligence warned about new escalations in the region. I think that this would be the perfect time. The chaos of an election in November, and especially if you get an isolationist retreating from the world kind of US administration in the form of Trump and Vance, that would be the perfect time for Serbia to kick off, for the Balkans to kick off. It's all very worrying indeed. A Hungarian foreign minister has said that Ukraine has blocked Russian oil supplies to Hungary via the Druzhba pipeline. According to him, Hungary's MOL and Russia's Lukoil, which supplies Hungary with oil from Russia, are jointly seeking a legally acceptable solution to resume delivery. So there's this oil that goes through from Russia through Ukraine to mainland Europe, which must keep going because it's in Ukraine's best interest to do so. But actually now they are blocking oil supplies going to Hungary from a pipeline, and that could be some interesting leverage, or it could be all rather escalatory. Interested to see where that goes. Already talked about that. That's out of order. Right. We are now going to start moving on to... Oh no, first of all, this is something I wanted to say yesterday. Lithuania is making an important step towards full energy independence. We're officially leaving Brel and will completely disconnect from Russian power grid in February 2025, says their leader Gitanas Nauseda. This is a result of strong political will and determination. Energy independence is invaluable. So moving away from that Russian sphere of influence. And it's worth noting that American firm Caterpillar equipment continues to be supplied to Russia through a British dealer, despite Caterpillar's announced exit from Russia. UK subsidiary Vostochnaya Technica imported $24 million plus worth of Cat gear to Russia through a complex international network. Medvedev, Russia's former president, has claimed that Ukraine joining NATO would be viewed as a declaration of war against Moscow. I presume that's a declaration of war with NATO because they're already at war. If you join NATO, we're going to go to war. You're already at war, mate. You're fighting us already. Yeah, but we'll go, we'll just be a bigger war. So I presume this is a war against NATO, but then that's stopping a country do what it wants. You're trying to control the agency of a foreign nation, and that is not acceptable. And here we have, in a new interview with Bloomberg, Donald Trump strongly suggests he will not defend Taiwan if attacked by China. This is super worrying, this. And actually, there's some interesting geopolitics and internal American politics with regard to their approach to their foreign diplomacy. So there's some interesting ramifications of this kind of approach. So, okay, he will not defend Taiwan if attacked by China. Quote, Taiwan took our chip business from us. I mean, how stupid are we? They took all of our chip business. They're immensely wealthy. I don't think we're any different from an insurance policy. Why? Why are we doing this? In other words, he is just... I mean, the problem is... The man's stupid, right? Like, he is a little bit dense. Because the only good outcome of this is a positive for Xi Jinping. Like, looks at that and goes, oh, nice one, thank you very much. And then well, obviously for Trump, he'll get the support of the Chinese bots because he'll want Trump to get in so that they can invade Taiwan. I mean, this is just so naive from Trump's point of view, but again, all he wants is power. He doesn't care who will fall by the wayside. He doesn't care about Ukraine. He doesn't care about Taiwan. He doesn't care about stability, international stability. He just wants power. And so he just, or he's just utterly naive and incredibly, volatile is not the right word, but he's risky with what he says. He just flies off the handle and says stuff without any thoughts. But actually, if you're the freaking president or the president to be, like, you need to check what you're saying. Both check it as in stop saying it and think about it, or check with other people to say, is it all right if I say this with regard to foreign policy, or will that cause freaking bonfires to go off left, right and centre? Yeah, don't say that. That's mental. Thanks for checking with us because that's stupid. But instead he just goes, screw Taiwan. Bunch of knobbers. Yeah, the microchips, we'll be selling those microchips as well for those losers. Yeah, China can just invade them, don't really care. Oh, by the way, Ukraine, whatever, screw them, sod them. You just go, like, come on, man. It's a really serious position you have. You need to think about what you say. But what's interesting with the positioning on China vis-a-vis Taiwan is it doesn't quite fit with where a lot of the Republican Party are going. So one of the big approaches to Ukraine is that, say, some Republicans, is that we shouldn't be spending money on Ukraine. The big challenge is China, right? So they're hawkish on China, but because they see Ukraine as a partisan thing, they're not hawkish on Ukraine, even though the biggest message to China would be for Ukraine to prevail against Russia with the support of the US, and China would then stop. And so you succeed with your approach to China by succeeding against Russia in Ukraine. But these people don't see that. Anyway, John Hudson here says Trump's comments to Bloomberg on Taiwan are sensational, but also consistent with his economic nationalist message. So it's the idea that we're going to retreat in an isolationist manner, and we're going to put tariffs on loads of Chinese goods and screw the Chinese and actually screw the Taiwanese because we're not really bothered about anyone. We just bother about ourselves, even though that would lead to insanely high inflation. And then that will lead to higher costs of everything, which means if you want to then re-export your stuff, or if you want to export your stuff out, it'll lead to higher costs for the stuff you want to export, which means that your exports will go down, and it's all just a bit disastrous. but it does fit in, like that kind of screw you Taiwan does fit in with his approach to isolationism. But what's extraordinary is how much they diverge, Trump's views diverge from the new wave of GOP China hawks who had claimed Trump ushered in a new consensus that held up Taiwan as sacrosanct. The GOP hawks appear to have more in common with the Biden National Security Council. And this is absolutely correct. And so you have a tension going forward that those people who are so worried about China and a growing strength of China, and therefore want to support Taiwan, are not going to be pleased with Trump's approach to Taiwan and China. And in fact, there's going to be some tension here, and there's going to be some mental gerrymandering that's going to have to take place, because no doubt these people will want to sound like they're still complete Trump acolytes and cultists, whilst also, you would think, remaining true to some of their ideological positions. But I don't know. It seems that remaining true to your ideological positions is something of the past here. Because where is it? We had JD Vance going against his position previously, and then I'm just trying to find where it is. Is it this one? No, sorry, I've got so much to talk about. But it's Nikki Haley. I thought I had something on Nikki Haley, but evidently not. No, so Nikki Haley has just come out and gone completely against Trump, and even done so on a foreign policy platform as well. That's really quite disturbing, and it appears that there is no ideological conviction to anyone in the GOP at the moment, because they just pay fealty to Trump, to genuflect to him, and all of their previous beliefs just go out the window, and they just align themselves to whatever Trump thinks, which is often on a whim anyway. I think it's exceedingly dangerous at the moment, the state of affairs in the US. By the way, with regard to the shooting of the assassination attempt on Trump, FBI had said there was no indication that the gunman had strong partisan political views. Absence of any political or ideological information at his home was notable, because most politically motivated would-be assassins leave a discernible trail of views. Again, I would like to see all of those Republicans who went off on one after the shooting, that Biden caused this and yada, 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 whilst also still maintaining their really divisive rhetoric, as they have done. I'd like them to come out and apologise for that. I mean, they won't. But I would like them to understand that this appears not to have been a partisan attempt on Trump's life. Now, US allies are properly grappling with JD Vance. There's been I've listened to a lot of analyses and people over in Europe saying that they are massively worried about the direction of travel for the American nation, for the Republicans at the moment under a Trump leadership. We've got Guy Verhofstadt, who is a big EU player, Belgian MEP. More champagne popping in the Kremlin, wrote Guy Verhofstadt, a former Belgian prime minister. In other words, they are super happy in the Kremlin with the appointment of JD Vance. Well, actually, we know this because Lavrov has come out. Well, first of all, I mean, I find this absolutely staggering. So on a night of military and foreign policy discussion in the RNC, the Republican National Committee convention in Milwaukee, they had these printed up. And these had to be printed up in advance. They had to be, weeks before they would know that they're going to be strong against Ukraine at this conference. Like, this doesn't just happen. This is a strategic, you've got to understand that this is part of the GOP framework of foreign diplomacy. Like, Trump will end the Ukraine war. That is their claim. You printed those placards. They are super important. It is about stopping. Trump will end the Ukraine war. And of course, he's going to do that within a day, etc., etc. But anyway, going back to Vance and Lavrov. So why isn't the mainstream media talking about how Russia's foreign minister was praising JD Vance today? The idea that your kind of sworn enemies are praising the appointment of someone as VP he's in favour of peace. This is Lavrov about JD Vance. He's in favour of peace. He's in favour of ending the assistance that's being provided to Ukraine. And we can only welcome that because that's what we need to stop pumping Ukraine full of weapons, and then the war will end. Lavrov is saying we need Ukraine to stop getting weapons, and that will end the war. It'll end the war because you'll be able to overcome them and take more of their territory through your invasion. And that's why you want Vance. This is absolutely horrific. As Tom Nichols says, when Lavrov thinks you're a friend, you're doing democracy wrong. This is definitely not cool. Stuart Stevens says, I did a lot of things in Republican campaigns himself as a Republican campaigner, but I never woke up working on the same side as the Russians. What a disgrace. So I can't tell you, I know I've said it a lot already, but JD Vance is a terrible appointment. I think it's strategically fairly bad, but shows how confident they are that they're going to win. But because I don't think he adds anything to the ticket. But he is Trump 2.0. But he's actually, I think, even more so. He's even more ideologically against Ukraine aid. This is bad for Ukraine. And it's interesting because David Sachs gave that talk that I played to you where he said this.
Then he provoked
Zelensky,
the Russians to invade Ukraine with talk of NATO expansion. Afterward, he rejected every opportunity for peace in Ukraine, including a deal to end the war just 2 months after it broke out. Then,
and there was just like a few people clapping, and then so some people saying, oh, people were booing him at the audience. So Jason J. Smart said, David Sachs looks genuinely surprised that the crowd boos him as he blames Ukraine's desire to be in NATO as having provoked Putin to invade, etc., etc. David Sachs doesn't like this, and there's this big spat that goes on. No one booed. In fact, some people clapped, and it's that line that people have jumped on. It's like, hey, some people clap me, so yay. You've gone there, and like, have you seen the whooping and hollering as soon as anyone mentions like immigration and this and send them back and all that? They're whooping and hollering. And actually, the fact that you are at an RNC that reacts like that, I think shows you, and I think this is the good news, and I tried to say this yesterday, that actually the fact that that was so lukewarmly received, and possibly even worse than lukewarmly received, shows that it is not actually that deeply popular amongst Republicans. David Sachs says, but keep deluding yourself about how unpopular your cause has become among Republican voters. Most are tired of the never-ending demands of our taxpayer dollars to go to a corrupt regime instead of spending it at home. And of course, polling does not support that. Polling supports most GOP in the electorate actually do support aid to Ukraine. And this is David Sachs being ideologically aligned to people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and all these kind of billionaire sorts that obviously want natural resources out of Russia and China, etc., etc. Jason J. Smart replies, some people clapped. David Sachs. Super David Sachs, that's a great accomplishment. Most but not all people laugh at you. At least Papa Putin is proud of you. And then, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But it's interesting that some people come to David Sachs's support. I was there. It was an excellent speech, very well received. And of course, it doesn't sound like it's very well received. Can confirm I was in the room, no one booed. Okay, well, I'm not really bothered about that. But Adam Kinzinger, dude, there were boos. Ha ha ha. You really have to convince yourself that some people clapped. That's embarrassing for you. And it kind of is, actually, to be fair. But like, David Sachs, just be under no illusion that David Sachs is an utter plonker. Just in every single way, he's a plonker. But what's super worrying is that you are getting people like David Sachs platforming Russian propaganda at the RNC. And then look who's walking around the RNC here. This is Paul Manafort. Now, I shouldn't have to tell you how compromised Paul Manafort is. Go and look at his Wikipedia page. Go and watch the documentary Active Measures, which is on Amazon Prime. I suggest you all watch Active Measures. It's the most information-dense documentary I've ever watched, and it is absolutely devastating in its critique of particularly Paul Manafort and how compromised he is by Russia. He's walking around the RNC. Trump wants him involved in the Republican campaign. Like, you've got David Sachs platforming Putin narrative, Paul Manafort, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz parroting this, you've got JD Vance acting as a proxy for Lavrov. This is absolutely insane. Adam Kinzinger, oh my lordy, you have sold out your morals. Putin. Oh, this is one I was looking for. This is with regard to, and then you got Nikki Haley saying, when Barack Obama was president, Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea. With Joe Biden as president, Putin invaded all of Ukraine. That was no. When Donald Trump was president, Putin did nothing. No invasions, no wars. That was no accident. Putin didn't attack Ukraine because he knew Donald Trump was tough. A strong president doesn't start wars, a strong president prevents them. Luckily, she was called out, Nikki Haley. So not only has she gone back on what she said on the campaign trail, then she's like paying fealty to her Uber Führer, but she's also factually incorrect. And she's actually... this is pointed out in some of the community notes. Factual errors. In 2017, when Trump was president, Russia increased its hostilities in Ukraine, making it the deadliest year since Russia invaded Crimea. In 2014, Trump did nothing. In 2018, Russia seized 3 Ukrainian naval vessels. Trump did nothing. And so it's factually incorrect. And Adam Kinsey, and remember, before some of you say, oh, javelins were given to Ukraine by Congress, not by Trump. He eventually signed off on them, but after he tried to withhold them until Zelensky gave him dirt on Biden. Trump didn't give javelins to Ukraine. Congress gave javelins to Ukraine. I did a section on this in a video to show you that it's a myth. And Trump now says that it was him that did it, but it wasn't him what did it. It was Congress what did it in a bipartisan agreement, and he tried to stop it. Adam Kinzinger said, oh my lordy, you've sold out your morals. Putin didn't invade because he didn't need to. He was already living his best dream with Trump. Biden wouldn't capitulate like Trump did. Remember when Trump said the invasion was genius? Of course you do. And that is, his own words, right? But anyway, go back to Paul Manafort, the guy that worked directly for Russia, running political campaigns to place Putin's candidates into European governments and then pardoned by Trump, is now walking around the RNC. It's just really, really, it's all so problematic. Lavrov saying all of this, just my goodness. Anyway, I just want to also point this. I mean, some stuff coming out of the RNC some of it is insane. So you've got Kimberly Guilfoyle, who is, interestingly, former wife, was she, or certainly partner of Gavin Newsom, and now married to Donald Trump Jr. But my goodness, they don't have a very good relationship. He's always slagging her off. But anyway, she is speaking here and just is nuts wrong.
It is no wonder that the heroes who stormed the beaches of Normandy and faced down communism sadly say they don't recognize our country anymore. This is not an accident.
No one's cheering that. Probably a lot of people going, what are you talking about? They didn't face down communism, they faced down fascism, the exact ideological opposite. Like, literally, the communists were fighting against fascists on the Eastern Front. And those landing in Normandy were fighting against Germans who were fascist. Like, what are you talking about? Now, either you are deeply, deeply stupid, or you're saying that on purpose and you're just like, it doesn't matter because no one fact checks, no one really cares. I'm just going to transpose a completely different enemy here because that fits in with our kind of attack on cultural Marxism and the fact that the Democrats are all commies. And so therefore, our soldiers were fighting against the Democrats, really. Now, if she's doing that on purpose, that's just really disingenuous and divisive and horrible. And if she's not doing it on purpose, she's just an absolute idiot. Either way, very bad news. Right, and on the Democrats front, where it's all kind of chaotic, it's really interesting. I do flip-flop around. Like, I think I'm 60-40 Biden needs to be replaced, but I do understand the argument he doesn't need to be replaced. Because actually, interestingly, the national polling, isn't as bad as you might think. And the 538, I know it was, I don't know if it still is, but the 538 aggregate polling has Biden up still, or the favourite to win still. And so there are polls that are coming out that are saying actually the assassination attempt hasn't shifted the polling in the way that most people intuitively immediately thought it would. And it's now returned to pre-assassination points. Now you'll expect to see a topical shift, a bump for the Republicans after the RNC convention if what they say on TV gets some traction. Usually you see a conference shift, but yeah, not 100% sure. So there is some good argument to suggest Biden should stay. Like, he's a known entity. There are no skeletons in his closet that could come out if you got a new guy in or woman, and suddenly you get an October surprise on them that doesn't work out. You know, everything about Biden is pretty much known. So yeah, there are definitely arguments for and against. I'm just a little bit of a risk taker, I think, here, and I would go for someone new to get that energizing of the base. But anyway, Adam Schiff has come out and called for Biden to drop out, which is big. You've had Nancy Pelosi working behind the scenes. Virtually all. See, remember what I said. There are three components to whether he should drop out or not: polls, and that includes like national polls, but also polls of Democrats themselves and what they believe; donors, and whether the donors are going to freeze their money or you're going to struggle to get donors and donations if people are not incentivized by Biden enough. And the third one are the lawmakers themselves. And as far as I work out, virtually every lawmaker behind the scenes wants Biden to go. Like, all of the people I've listened to who have contacts right throughout the Democrat political machine are saying that, yeah, all everyone I've spoken to wants Biden to go. So there is that one, but they're not public enough, and these ideas are out there that Biden has cut down his inner circle so much that there are just a few people, and they're not giving. It's a bit like Putin. Does he have the information on the battlefront about the war in Ukraine that he needs in order to make continually good decisions? He's making poor decisions because actually he's being fed a load of bunkum about the scare quote successes on the battlefront by a select few that are around him. Is that the same for Biden, where he's actually now surrounded, but he's cut down his inner circle so much that these people are just feeding him stuff and just saying, oh, don't worry about those polls, forget them, you look at these polls, and he's just getting a distorted view. And actually he needs to be phoned up by people like Nancy Pelosi, who's apparently phoned him for the second time just recently and told him what for. He needs those Zoom meetings with the lawmakers like Jason Crow, who said, you know, what for, and Biden got all uppity, but he's probably, because that's coming to him as a bit of a surprise because his own team haven't been feeding him a correct interpretation of, you know, the lay of the land. And it's interesting that CNN then reported this last night. And I keep talking about this because it's so important for global geopolitics and for Ukraine that I have to.
And talking to a senior Democratic advisor tonight who is telling me this. He said he believes the president is being, quote, more receptive to these calls of concern. He goes on to say this: the private conversations with the Hill are continuing, this advisor tells me. He's being receptive, not as defiant as he is publicly. Goes on to saying, talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, who initially he wondered how she may fare in a campaign should it come to that. I'm told now he's asking questions saying, do you think Kamala can win? Again, this advisor offers caution saying this: it is still unclear where he's going to land, but he seems to be listening. So, Jake, what we do know, this is a new moment for President Biden. Tomorrow marks 3 weeks since the debate in Atlanta, as you well know. He's heard so much concern from across the Democratic Party. Time is running short. The Democratic National Committee was thinking about starting their nomination process next week. That is now on hold. That will not begin until August 1st. So there is a bit of time for the president to make his decision. But hanging over all of this is the same thing as it's been for the last 3 weeks. If not him, who? But tonight, as the president flies back to the East Coast from Las Vegas, it is certainly a new moment for him and his potential candidacy, Jay.
So apparently he's a bit more receptive. Of course, what you're going to see in public, and this is a very important, and I'll leave you with this. So the important idea to remember is that Biden will always be absolutely hardcore in on staying in public. Like whatever you're going to hear from him will be 100% I'm staying in the race until he's not. Sounds obvious, but actually he's never going, even if he's actually having these doubts and even if he's thinking about giving up and whatever, he will never allow that to come out through what he says until he says, I am stepping down or whatever, I'm stepping aside. Because as soon as he says, oh yeah, I'm thinking about it, or yeah, some people have been worried about that in the past, like that's your crack, and then it all falls down, right? So he will be absolutely 110% behind his own nomination and the presidential campaign until the point where he says, yeah, I'm not doing it. So it's 110% or 0%. Like there isn't any in between, even if there really is a case of having those sentiments behind closed doors. So you're always going to expect you're always going to expect him to say very strongly that he's not stepping down until he says he does. But I don't know. I see the arguments both ways for him going and staying. And it's just, we're going to have to keep an eye on the polls in that respect. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching. Please take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.